While everyone was watching house prices, something else was falling. Quietly. In the background. Where nobody was looking. And it tells you more about where this market is heading than any house price index ever could. Let me show you what the data actually says. House prices didn't crash this month. Nothing dramatic flashed across the screen. No emergency headlines. No panic on the evening news. But under the surface? Something quieter moved first. Because here's what most people don't understand about the UK housing system. The earliest warning usually isn't the price. It's the work. The actual building. The actual repairs. The actual physical activity that keeps the whole machine running. And in November 2025, the Office for National Statistics reported something that should concern you. Construction output fell 1.3% in a single month. Now, on its own, that might not sound dramatic. But here's the thing. That came after a 1.2% fall in October, which itself was revised downward from the original estimate. 2 consecutive monthly declines. Back to back. Getting worse. On paper, that's just construction. Boring. Technical. Something for economists to worry about. In reality, it's the housing machine losing momentum. The part that builds homes. The part that repairs them. The part that keeps the whole system moving. And when that part starts slowing down, everything else eventually follows. But most people won't notice. Not yet. Not until it's already done the damage. Because housing doesn't crash loudly. It stalls quietly. In places nobody's watching. But here's what really got my attention. It's not just new builds falling. It's something else too. And when both of them drop together, that's when you know confidence has left the building. Let me break down what the ONS actually reported. Because there's a detail in here that most commentators completely missed. Construction output isn't just one thing. It's 2 things. First, you've got new work. That's the shiny stuff. New housing developments. Commercial buildings. Fresh construction projects breaking ground. In November, new work fell 1.9%. Nearly 2%. In 1 month. That's developers hitting pause. Projects stalling. Starts getting delayed. Sites going quiet. But here's where it gets properly concerning. The second part is repair and maintenance. That's not glamorous. It's not headline grabbing. But it's absolutely crucial. Repair and maintenance is the everyday work that keeps existing buildings functioning. Renovations. Repairs. Improvements. The stuff that keeps homes livable. In November, repair and maintenance also fell. Down 0.4%. Now, 0.4% sounds small. Barely worth mentioning. But think about what it actually means. When both new work and repairs fall together, that's not a single problem. That's not one sector struggling. That's broad caution. Across the entire industry. Across every type of construction activity. Developers are pausing new projects. And households are postponing repairs. That's a market where confidence has gone walkabout. Proper missing. Nobody knows where it went. Let me explain why that repair number matters so much. Because most people skip right past it. Repair and maintenance spending is household confidence made visible. It's discretionary. It's optional. It's the stuff you do when you feel secure about the future. When people feel confident, they renovate the kitchen. They fix the dodgy roof. They extend the house. They invest in their home. When people feel uncertain, they postpone. They wait. They make do. We'll do it next year. Let's see what happens with rates first. Maybe when things settle down. And that's exactly what the data is showing. Households are pulling back on major works. Not because the work isn't needed. Not because the roof doesn't leak. Not because the kitchen isn't falling apart. Because the spending feels risky right now. Because the maths is getting tighter. Because every spare pound matters. And when that happens, the construction industry feels it immediately. Before anyone else. But the ONS didn't just give us numbers. They gave us a reason. And it's one word that explains everything about where we are right now. The ONS didn't just publish data. They told us why it happened. And the word they used? Uncertainty. They specifically mentioned delays in work and customer spending affected by economic uncertainty ahead of the autumn budget. That phrase sounds harmless. Corporate speak. Bureaucratic language. But translate it into plain English. And it's devastating. The system hit the pause button. Developers delayed phases. Landlords delayed upgrades. Commercial clients postponed projects. Households cancelled renovations. Everyone waited. For clarity. For certainty. For someone to tell them it was safe to spend again. And while they waited, nothing happened. That's what uncertainty actually looks like. Not panic. Not crisis. Not dramatic collapse. Just nothing. Silence. Empty order books. phones that don't ring. And that silence is deafening if you're a builder waiting for the next job. Here's what most people don't understand about pause behavior. Nobody's canceling everything. Nobody's in full meltdown mode. People are just waiting. And individually, that seems rational. I'll wait until spring. I'll wait until rates come down. I'll wait until the budget dust settles. But collectively, it's catastrophic. Because when enough people pause at the same time, the pipeline empties. Projects that should have started, don't. Work that should have happened, stalls. Trades that should be busy, aren't. The economy doesn't crash. It freezes. And freezing can be just as damaging as crashing. Just slower. Just quieter. Just harder to see until it's already done the damage. This is how housing slowdowns often begin. Not with headlines. With fewer starts. Slower completions. Projects that don't get cancelled, they just stop progressing at normal speed. And by the time anyone notices, the damage is already baked in. Now you might be thinking, if the economy is doing okay, why would housing feel fragile? That's the contradiction nobody's talking about. Here's something that might confuse you. On the same day the ONS published that construction data, the headline narrative was completely different. UK economy grows 0.3% in November. GDP up. Economy recovered. Things improve. So on paper, it looks like things are stable. Happy days. Nothing to worry about. But here's the contradiction. While GDP was rising, construction was falling. And housing depends on construction the same way your body depends on circulation. You can have good news in one place, while the system quietly struggles somewhere else. The heart might be beating, but the extremities are going cold. That's why this kind of mixed data matters. It doesn't scream. It hints. It whispers. It suggests. And if you're not paying attention, you miss it completely. Until one day, the whisper becomes a shout. And by then, it's too late to prepare. So who actually feels this first? Because it's not everyone at once. It's not a simultaneous hit. It's a sequence. A chain reaction. And it starts with the people closest to the physical work. Builders and subcontractors feel it early. When output falls, it shows up as stop-start scheduling. Smaller orders. Thinner margins. More caution before committing to new phases. Jobs that were supposed to happen, don't. Contracts that were supposed to come, get delayed. Work that was supposed to be steady, becomes uncertain. Not a shutdown. A slow tightening. The kind that turns stable work into precarious work. And that affects real people. Real families. Real livelihoods. Then homeowners feel it. When the budget gets tight, repairs and improvements become optional spending. The first thing to go. People delay the kitchen. They delay the roof. They delay the extension. They delay everything that isn't absolutely essential. We'll make do for another year. But here's the second-order effect most people don't consider. If you can't afford to fix or upgrade your home, you're less likely to sell. Because you can't present the house properly. Because the work needs doing before you list. Because buyers will see the problems and lowball you. So mobility drops. Listings don't flow normally. The market becomes less liquid. Fewer confident moves. More waiting. More stuck. Buyers feel it next. Not as a statistic. As a mood. As a feeling. When the wider economy looks uneven. When construction is slowing. When the news feels uncertain. Confidence softens. People start asking questions. If construction is slowing, what does that say about next year? Is now really the right time? Should we wait? And buying a home isn't just a financial decision. It's a belief decision. Belief that your job is stable. Belief that rates won't wreck you. Belief that prices won't punish you the moment you move in. When that belief wobbles, people hesitate. They delay. They stay put. And the market slows a little more. But there's another group caught in this. And their situation might actually be the worst of all. Renters are caught in a completely different squeeze. And honestly, it might be the most frustrating position of all. Think about it. If new supply slows, fewer homes get built. Fewer rentals come onto the market. Competition stays intense. Rents stay high. You're stuck paying through the nose, while waiting for a market that never gets more affordable. But it gets worse. If repair work is being deferred by landlords, the quality of rental stock quietly degrades. That dodgy boiler doesn't get fixed properly. The damp problem gets managed instead of solved. The windows that don't close right stay that way. Again, not dramatic. Not headline grabbing. Just slower maintenance. Slower upgrades. More, we'll do it later. Later becomes months. Months become years. And the system frays at the edges. Renters feel it as declining quality. As landlords doing the bare minimum. As homes that slowly get worse instead of better. And there's nothing you can do about it. Because the alternative is, what exactly? Move to somewhere else that's just as bad? Pay even more for something marginally better? It's an absolute nightmare for millions of people. And it's directly connected to what's happening in construction output. Now let's talk about banks. Because they are watching this data too. And they are reacting in ways that matter. Construction weakness is a risk signal. Not necessarily defaults tomorrow. But caution today. Especially around development finance. Especially around risk appetite. Especially around who they are willing to lend to and on what terms. When the construction sector wobbles, banks don't panic. They adjust. Slightly tighter criteria. Slightly more scrutiny. Slightly less appetite for marginal deals. And that feeds back into the system. Developers who might have gotten finance, don't. Projects that might have proceeded, stall. The pipeline weakens a little more. But here's where the credit backdrop connects directly to housing demand. The Bank of England's Credit Conditions Survey reported something important. Lenders said demand for secured lending for house purchase decreased, and they expected it to decrease again in the next quarter. At the same time, remortgaging demand was expected to increase. That combination is crucial, because it tells you two things at once. 1. Fewer people feel confident stepping into a purchase. 2. More people are dealing with the cost of housing they already have. It's a market where survival is taking priority over expansion. Where managing existing debt matters more than taking on new debt. Where defensive behavior dominates. Turnover slows. The system keeps running. But it runs slower. Stickier. Less fluid. That's the quiet version of stress. The kind that doesn't make headlines. But absolutely changes outcomes. So what does all of this actually mean? Let me connect the dots. Because when you see the full picture, it's hard to ignore. Let me connect all of this for you. Because individually, these data points might seem disconnected. But together, they paint a picture. Here's what's actually happening. If fewer people buy, fewer projects start. If fewer projects start, fewer trades get consistent work. If homeowners pause repairs, housing quality and mobility worsen. If banks and lenders become more cautious, the pipeline tightens again. Each part reinforces the next. Not as a collapse. As a gradual system failure. Where everything technically still works. But less smoothly. Less efficiently. At a higher cost. With more friction. With more stress. The machine keeps running. But it's grinding. Squeaking. Struggling. And eventually, something has to give. Now, there's one more layer worth mentioning. And this is where the maths often stops working for households. Mortgage resets. Over the last few years, millions of people fixed at very low rates. 1.5%. 2%. Sometimes even lower. Deals that felt like free money at the time. But those fixes are ending. One by one. Month by month. And when they end, the monthly payment jumps. Sometimes by hundreds of pounds. Sometimes by a third or more. Even before anyone defaults. Behavior changes. People cut optional spending. They delay moves. They delay renovations. They stop taking risks. They hunker down. And that change in behavior? It's exactly the kind of thing you see first in activity data like construction output. Before it shows up clearly in prices. The repair job that gets cancelled. The extension that gets postponed. The renovation that becomes maybe next year. All of it feeds into the construction numbers. All of it shows up in the ONS data. All of it tells you what households are actually feeling. Not what they're saying. What they're doing. And right now, they are pulling back. Quietly. Carefully. Nervously. And if you zoom out slightly, the pattern gets even clearer. The ONS also published the 3-month picture. Construction output for the 3 months to November 2025 was the weakest 3-monthly reading since March 2023. March 2023. Nearly 3 years ago. That's not a blip. That's not noise. That's not a one-off. That's a trend. And when the trade press picked this up, the headlines were clear. Quarterly construction output falls at sharpest rate for more than 2 years. While GDP rebounded slightly, construction was the weak spot. The laggard. The problem child. The economy can bounce. But the housing foundations? They're not bouncing with it. So what should you actually watch for next? Let me give you the signals that matter. So is this an early warning? Active stress? Or full escalation? Based on the data, it's best described as active stress building through activity. Not a dramatic price event. Not a crash. 2 consecutive declines don't prove anything on their own. But they signal something important. The housing system isn't breaking loudly. It's slowing quietly. And that's often how it starts. So here's what to watch next. Calmly. With discipline. Without panic. First, whether ONS revises October or November again in future releases. Revisions can change the shape of the trend. What looks bad might get worse. Or it might get revised away. Second, what the next construction print shows. Does the decline stabilize? Or does it extend into December and beyond? That's the key question. Third, whether industry forecasts get revised. The Construction Leadership Council's baseline shows private new housing flat in 2025, with only modest growth in 2026. Flat isn't expansion. Flat is survival mode. And if that forecast gets revised downward, it tells you viability is getting worse, not better. Fourth, whether lender expectations about purchase demand match real-world approvals. Because right now, lenders expect demand to fall. If approvals confirm that, the slowdown is real. And finally, watch the repair and maintenance numbers. Because that's household confidence in real time. When people start spending on improvements again, that's when you know the mood is shifting. Until then, caution dominates. So where does that leave us? Construction output fell 1.3% in November. After a 1.2% fall in October. Both new work and repairs declined. 3-monthly output is at its weakest since March 2023. The ONS points to uncertainty and delays. Banks expect purchase demand to fall. Industry forecasts show flat private housing. Households are pulling back on discretionary spending. This isn't a crash. It's a grind. A slow squeeze. A quiet freeze. A system that keeps running, but runs worse than it should. Prices don't need to collapse to cause damage. Activity just needs to slow. Confidence just needs to fade. Decisions just need to pause. And that's exactly what's happening. When confidence fades, the system doesn't crash all at once. It simply stops moving the way it used to. Projects get delayed. Repairs get postponed. Purchases get deferred. Moves get cancelled. And the housing market becomes less like a market, and more like a waiting room. Everyone sitting there, watching the clock, hoping someone tells them what happens next. If you're in the UK, I'd genuinely like to hear what you're seeing. Are building sites quieter in your area? Are projects slowing down? Are repairs being delayed? Are you postponing work on your own home because the maths doesn't add up? Are buyers hesitating more than they used to? Are sellers sitting on the market longer? Drop a comment. Tell me your town. Tell me what's actually happening on the ground. Because the national statistics only tell part of the story. Your local experience fills in the gaps. Subscribe for calm, evidence-based breakdowns of what's happening in UK housing. No hype. No panic. No doom-mongering. Just the data that matters. This isn't the end of the UK housing story. But the cracks are showing. Not in prices. Not yet. In activity. In confidence. In the work that's not getting done. The housing machine is losing momentum. And most people haven't even noticed. But now you have. See you in the next one.